Hello and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, I'm Ange and today is already my July wrap up. So August is here. July went by really fast and I don't know about any of you, but I'm already feeling the fall kick. Like I'm ready for pumpkin stuff and the leaves to turn orange and yellow and red and the cool weather and sweater. I'm just ready for it. So it's fine. It's still gonna be really hot for the next 2 months in Iowa, but it's fine. So let's just get into this. I read 10 books in July, which is the same that I did last month. And I am just really happy for these last 2 months because last year I'm pretty sure I read 3 books in June and maybe 4 or so in July. They just weren't good months for me. But I think I've kind of figured out what reading works best for me in the summer months. I think my moods for reading change depending on the season. So just, I don't know, the types of books. I can't read any heavy fantasy in the summer, I feel like, because for me that's more cozy reading, which is, to me, that's fall, winter, and maybe a little bit of spring. So anyway, we're gonna get into these and they're just gonna be in the order that I read them. So this first book I read mostly in June, but I finished it on July 1st. So we're counting it as July. And that is On the Edge of the Dark Sea of Darkness by Andrew Peterson. This is the first book in the Wingfeather saga. I got these for Christmas this past year and I finally sat down to read them. This was really good. I gave it 5 stars. I wasn't sure how I felt about it to start with. For being a children's book, it doesn't, a lot of children's books are they lay out what the book is about in the first chapter. This one didn't really do that. It kind of developed the world first, and I don't even really know how to describe this. It's kind of like a fairy tale, but almost like a folk tale, but not. It's about these 3 kids who live in this foresty, it's not in the forest, but by this forest, and live near the Dark Sea. And they live with their mother and their grandfather. And they have this town. They learn school at home. The oldest boy kind of helps in the library. Well, it's kind of a library. It's like a bookshop, kind of. And then there are these lizard creatures that are patrolling the town and have kind of taken over their country, which I think is their country, Aniera. And these lizard things are very mean. They're called fangs, and they're looking for these lost jewels. And so the boy finds a map talking about the jewels and kind of goes on this adventure and learning about the history, his family history, because his dad died in the war, which happened a long time ago. Really good. I'm doing a terrible job of explaining it because it is a little bit confusing, but it's really good. One thing I really like about this book, and I'm hoping all the rest of the books are like that, is that there are footnotes at the bottom of pages, and this is completely fictional. All of it is completely fictional, and the footnotes are fictional, and it just kind of gives you more background into their world, which is just so cool. So there is an appendice, and it has just a bunch of stuff. So the footnotes are go check out this page, and I just think it's so cool. There's images. It's just so cool. I highly recommend this if you enjoy children's books and world building, and just I really, really recommend this book. It's so, so, so good. Definitely fantasy based, although there hasn't really been magic, so fairy tale, folktale-ish, super good. Okay, the next book I read was not one that was on my reading list whatsoever. We were driving back from our vacation and my husband had read it while we were on vacation and was like, just read this. So I read I'd Like to Play Alone by Tom Segura. And this is his autobiography and just kind of talking about different experiences in his life. And it's really good. I laughed a lot. Tom Segura is one of Nate's favorite comedians, him and Bert Kreischer, who actually we're going to see in November. We're going to see Bert. I'm actually really excited about that. But there's just really good, like the stories in here were good and just really interesting. And there's one chapter dedicated to his dad who passed away recently that was like really sad. It almost made me cry because it was just sad. Some of the stuff that I read in here, like I already kind of knew because of Nate. He knows all that stuff. So, yeah, it was really good. I enjoyed it. It's just autobiography, nonfiction. And, you know, I don't really read nonfiction, but I will read an autobiography if it's about specific people. I do like autobiographies or like memoirs. Okay, the next book that I read, well, the next two that I read, and I'm actually going to talk about all four of them because we're just going to get this out of the way. I read volumes 13 through 16 of Dengeki Daisy, and I finished the manga. I really, really, really loved this series. I kind of wish it would have stopped at 15 because the 16 was just like a really small amount, like finalizing what happened, and then it was just like extra content, which was still good. It just like wasn't the story. So good. I absolutely love this manga. I don't know when I'm gonna pick up manga again, but that was an excellent series to start off with, and I'm really happy that I read it. And I was really sad for it to be over because I really just loved the characters a lot. So I'm not gonna go much more into that. I've talked about it a lot. It's just about this hacker and this high school girl, basically. I've talked about it a lot. If you want to know more, check out some other videos of mine because I talk about them a lot. Okay, so next I read It Happened One Summer by Tessa Bailey. And this was a book that my mother-in-law had read, so then she just gave them to me so I could read them. And I was like, okay. I had no intentions of ever reading a Tessa Bailey book, mainly just because like romance really isn't a genre I read too much of. I do read it occasionally. Typically I like my romances to be in fantasy, but I will pick up a romance book occasionally. And actually this summer I've kind of been craving them a little bit more. And so this one was so good. So good. I loved the setting. So it takes place in Northwest, like the Northwest Pacific area. It takes place in Washington. And when I read the first chapter and was like, don't know if I'm gonna like this book. Loved it. And it's about this party girl. Her name is Piper. She's in LA. She's got like a million bajillion Instagram followers and all this stuff, and was like famous basically. And she's at this party and goes through this breakup as she'd been dating this guy for like 3 weeks. And her stepdad is basically like, okay, you are out of control, because she threw a crazy party and got arrested, blah, blah, blah. He's like, you're out of control. I'm sending you to Washington, which is where her father, her like actual father, birth father, I should say, grew up, and like where they lived. But he died. He was a fisherman, a crab fisherman, and he died in the Bering Strait during a storm. So her stepdad's like, you need to grow up, basically. So sends her off where she meets this really crabby fisherman. I just loved him so much, and her sister goes with her to just like show support. She goes with her. They're there, I think, for 3 months is what the length of time is, and they end up learning more about their own history, their father's history, and their father owned a bar, so they cleaned it up and just like kind of really fell in love with this town and the people there. Oh, it was just so good. It was so, so, so good. I absolutely loved this book. I gave it 5 stars. After that, I read a book that takes a little bit of a darker note. So I'm going to say right now that this is a trigger warning for school shootings, mass shootings, suicide, depression, bullying. If I missed any of those, I apologize, but just beware, I will be talking about those. And I will put a timestamp here over in this area when I move on to the next book. So this is The Hate List by Jennifer Brown. I checked this out from the library because my branch manager had been talking about how much she really enjoyed it. This was written in 2008, by the way. So this is actually like an old book, but it just is so relevant to today. It's a very interesting book. So like, the main character is this girl named, her name starts with a V. I don't remember what her name is, but she and her boyfriend had created this hate list. Like, she wasn't intending to do anything with it. Literally, it was just people who annoyed them, or not even people, but it could have been like homework. And they just wrote it on this hate list. And they had this little notebook that they kept. And one day, her boyfriend comes to school and starts shooting people. And she had absolutely no idea that he intended to do this or was planning it or anything. She gets shot in the thigh because she's trying to save someone that he's trying to shoot. And all these people were on the hate list. And that list comes out because police find it or someone finds it, and it comes out. So a lot of people are like really, really, really mean to her because the shooting takes place on May 2nd. So they have the summer off, and then the book picks up when school is starting again. So she has to go back to school. She's been in therapy. She's been recovering with her leg, and she's really nervous to go back to school because everybody is going to think that she was in on it and she was like planning it when she wasn't. So she has no friends. She is getting, not quite bullied, but people are like, why are you here? Like, really kind of mean to her. And a lot of people are still traumatized by it. Like, who wouldn't be? So it's a really tough book to read. And also her parents, they made me so angry to read about. Her mother and her father in particular. Like, they didn't believe her, thought she was in on it, like, looked at her totally different. And it broke my heart. But the way the book is written is that it's in present day, but we do get flashback, well, not really flashbacks, but like it switches sometimes to the day of the shooting. And so then we kind of learn the events of what happens, and some like other flashbacks that we get of like her and her boyfriend's relationship. It's just like, it's completely just, it's a heartbreaking book. Really, really, really good. And this one, the book that I read, also had a novella at the end. So there was like maybe 100 or so pages of a novella about one of the other kids and their group of friends that they'd had before the shooting, who kind of possibly knew what was going to happen and didn't do anything about it. So it was really good. A really tough subject to read about, especially given the amount of mass shootings and specifically school shootings we have in America. It's absolutely ridiculous. So a really great book. I gave it 5 stars. It was well written and it was really good, just really heartbreaking. So we're gonna move on to something happier. So after I read that, I read Hook, Line, and Sinker by Tessa Bailey, and this is like, not like it's like a sequel. These are the Bellinger Sisters series. There's just 2 of them. So this one's about Piper, the sister Piper. This one's about the sister Hannah, and just another fisherman that's actually Piper's like love interest. In the first one's like best friend. So this one was not quite as good as the first one. It was good, but I felt like the plot wasn't as great as the first book. There wasn't, like, you know how there's always like a climax or something happens in romance books and you're like, no, fix it. Well, this one like didn't really have that. So I don't know, it just kind of fell a little bit flat for me. I still gave it 4 stars because it was really good. I liked the characters. But maybe I just didn't like Hannah's storyline as much either. I don't know. Either way, it was good, just not as good. You're still in the same setting, still back in that small Washington port town, still talking about fishermen and stuff like that. It's just really good. After that, I read a graphic novel, and I read The Wings of Fire graphic novel number 5. This was The Brightest Night, and this is the latest of the graphic novels that's been released. Like, I think this was released in March of this year or May. And this is technically, I'm pretty sure it's like the end of the Wings of Fire, like, main storyline. I know that the chapter books, there's like 15 or 16 of them, and they you get more characters introduced, but this is like the main storyline. This one was really good. I gave it 5 stars. It could be my new favorite of the 5 that I've read. The Wings of Fire is a children's graphic novel about these 5 dragonettes who were prophesized to in the War on Dragons. So each book has been about one of the 5 dragons, and they go to find like their families and try to stop the war, kind of figure out what's going on, figuring out which queen they need to, or which dragon they need to name queen. Because these dragons are raised in like isolation basically, and so they wanted to find their families. Okay, and the freaking last book that I read, sorry this is so long, the last book that I read in July, so good. I finished it yesterday, which was July 31st. And that was The Bookwoman's Daughter by Kim Michelle Richardson. And this is the sequel, but also it could be a standalone to The Bookwoman of Troublesome Creek. And this one, I think I like it a teeny bit better. So I checked this out from the library. I own the first one. I'm gonna buy this one. I just checked it out from the library to save money for right now. But I will be getting the hardback of this, absolutely. So good. So this one is about the daughter of the main character in the first book. She is also a blue person, except it's just in her hands and her feet. The blue people of Kentucky, so it takes place in Kentucky, it takes place in the 1950s, and they're in the Appalachian Mountains. But there are these people who they have this congenital disease, I think that's the word I'm looking for, congenital, that turns their skin blue. And it's called methemoglobinemia, something like that. And so people look at them differently because they are different, and they're treated very similarly to the Black people at that time. So like laws affect them more harshly, especially she's a female, so laws affect her even more so. She's also a minor, so they affect her even more so. Her parents, her mother is completely blue. They're not her birth parents, but they're her parents. And her father is just white, and that basically broke the miscegenation laws, so you can't interracially marry. And so they're both in jail right now, and she's on her own. She's 16. She has a year and a half before she turns 18 where she's declared an adult. And social services want to put her into this reform home where you basically are a child slave. And so she's trying not to. She's trying to go back to Troublesome Creek where her family was and live with someone that her parents said could be her guardian. And so something happens, and then she gets a job that her mother had being a bookwoman. So she's carrying books all through Appalachia. To her patrons, she makes a friend with the new forest fire lady. What are they called? And also kind of makes an enemy. So she's just trying to stay under the radar so that she does not go to the reform house. And she's also trying to fight for her emancipation so that she could be a legal adult in her own terms, because she's got a job, she has a house, that she's making money, all this stuff. So really freaking good. I gave it 5 stars, obviously. And I really might think that this is better than the first one. And also another thing I really like about this is there's a lot of history in this, but also at the end, fire tower lookout. That's what I was looking for. She puts in a lot of of her research. So images she's had, people she got to talk to, more images of like the pack horse librarians. Super, super cool. I might be partial to this book because I work at a library. I have my MLS. So like, I just absolutely love these books. And they're clean, they're great. I highly recommend them. Absolutely recommend them. And those are all the books I read in July. So I'm sorry this was long. And I kind of got a little long-winded about some of the books, but I like to talk about what I'm reading. Obviously. Okay. Before this gets any longer, let's wrap this up. What was the best book you read in July? Let me know a little bit about what it is, or what it's about, and what it's called. I always need more books to add to my ongoing TBR that will never shrink. And socials are all down below. I'm not active on any of them. Instagram, I'm kind of debating on whether I want to be active on or not, so bear with me on that one. And I hope you guys have a great week, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye!